Welcome to Over the Target, a Washington Examiner show about investigations in Washington, D.C. and beyond. I'm managing editor Chris Irvin. I'm joined, as always, by investigations editor Sarah Bedford. And back after a 2 week hiatus, delighted to have Kaylin Dees, our Justice Department reporter, to talk about everything. It's been a really, really busy week. It's been a very emotional and a tiring exhausting week, and let's get into it. Starting with Charlie Kirk and what's happened. Horrible, horrible tragedy. I think everybody's really still kind of coming to terms with what happened. And yesterday, when all this was happening, and there was the um, I want to say, for lack of a better term, the kind of fog of war of what was going on. I was really struck by the amount of contradictory information from multiple accounts are out there. People that not just kind of everyday Joes. There was a lot of the kind of MAGA influencer sphere who seemed to kind of want to say their piece. And the but the most surprising one was the FBI director Kash Patel, who moments before there was an FBI press conference, he released a statement saying that a subject had been apprehended, and it made it sound like they'd got their guy. Now it may be semantics, it may be language, it may just be that Kash Patel was kind of working on a different timeline, maybe. But that was very clear minutes later. The FBI field office were saying that wasn't the case. There was a person of interest who was subsequently released. There was a person that we'd been talking about earlier in the day who was kind of a known agitator who got arrested for obstruction of justice, I believe. But I guess my question, though, Sarah, is why can't we just sort of take a minute and pause and wait for the facts to play out and the information to play out? Or is that impossible in this day and age now of social media where everybody has to get their take off?
Well, you see that sort of thing happen a lot in the wake of fast-moving news events. I was always brought up with the training that it's better to be right than to be first. That's sort of the journalist mindset of training. But Charlie Kirk was a very important figure to millions of people, but especially to a lot of people who sort of are journalist adjacent, but operate in the sort of alternative media sphere and don't play by the same rules. So I think you saw a lot of the narrative being driven yesterday online by people who don't necessarily have all the layers of fact checking and verification that a traditional newsroom would have. The rumor mill was flying yesterday about Charlie Kirk's condition, and probably 30 minutes or so before it was formally announced by President Trump that Charlie Kirk was dead. I'm sure I wasn't alone in having already heard that news through the grapevine myself, but we obviously wouldn't have shared that without having official confirmation. But I think you saw a lot of hearsay being shared in real time.
Yeah.
That being said, I think what FBI Director Kash Patel did with announcing and then retracting the apprehension of a subject ultimately is going to be a very tiny footnote in the story of what happened on September 10th. And it is so important. I couldn't, it's not possible to overstate how important it is for the soul of the nation that they catch this guy. I mean, this guy cannot get away. The FBI certainly knows that. In the Luigi Mangione shooting, which is sort of what, I mean, it didn't have nearly the same impact, but just in terms of the sort of methods and what played out in the immediate aftermath, the shooter of the United Healthcare CEO did get away for a day or two. And initially, that was believed to be indicative that this was some sort of professional hit, right?
Hmm.
There had been messages scrawled on the bullets. The guy had managed to get away, knew where this United Healthcare CEO was going to be. And so there was a lot of wild speculation that a professional had done it. And once they apprehended this guy, we knew that wasn't the case. This was just someone who had been very, very radicalized. And so a lot of the conversations and speculation that I'm seeing that's so interesting and we just don't know is, was this guy a highly trained professional? Or was it a radicalized person with very little training who perhaps got lucky or, had well prepared? the fact that he's or she has evaded capture for this long has stoked that speculation, but those are all questions that will be answered once they get the guy.
For sure, I think you're totally right. We simply need the answers, and I think the longer that we don't have them, the speculation is just kind of out of control. I've seen, countless different strands and conspiracy theories that are already developing on social media. We probably shouldn't get into that for our own sanity. But hopefully they are closing in on their guy. And certainly the breadcrumbs seem to be kind of coming together. I want to move on to a different subject that came out yesterday. Obviously, the Kirk news it has superseded everything as it rightly should. But in the morning, the first extracts of Kamala Harris's book came out, and one thing that I was particularly interested in was her kind of retelling of events of in the run up to Joe Biden's debate. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of this ties into the AutoPen investigation, and Joe Biden's cognitive abilities. Harris, in the extract that was released by The Atlantic, said that Joe Biden, it wasn't a cognitive thing. She said it was down to schedule and he was simply tired. But Sarah, you and I have talked about this countless times, and it just doesn't add up for me. And it feels again like Kamala Harris and the Democrats are gaslighting the public into believing something that we saw with our own eyes, which was this man was not up to being president, and they're still telling us a different story.
Right. I think that the excerpt that we read from Kamala Harris's book does nothing to address the actual criticisms of Kamala Harris, which is that she didn't have any of her own substantive policy positions and that she wasn't credible on the issue of Joe Biden's age. If she were really as close as she claimed to be to the centers of power and decision making, then clearly she would have known that the president was in cognitive decline, which even his allies now openly admit. The criticism that she chose to lodge against Joe Biden, though, was just a procedural one and honestly, kind of a petty one that she thinks the White House aides didn't want her to shine, is the word that she used, that they treated her like a potted plant at photo ops. That is not really anywhere on the radar of any of the boxes she would need to check to rehabilitate her image, right? We didn't hear her say that she would have made any substantively different decisions on immigration. In fact, even in just that little excerpt, she went back to sort of beating the drum of, well, we just needed a bipartisan border bill, which is demonstrably false by how quickly
Right.
Donald Trump was able to seal up the border just by enforcing legislation that's already on the books. So I am not sure what Kamala Harris set out to accomplish here, but she somehow managed to disappoint all Democrats and also every other prospective reader of her book. So I'm not sure she's doing herself any favors.
Yeah, I think my question is ultimately who is this for? And if she does have the 2028 aspirations, then who what's her audience and who's going to go for her? I personally I just don't see what the way back is for her there. But more power to her if she wants to try and spend another $1 billion getting elected in what's going to be a absolutely vicious Democratic 2028 primary. Um, I want to talk a little bit about Jeffrey Epstein, the man who won't go away. There was two fairly major updates this week, which was first off, the House Oversight released this infamous birthday book, the 50th birthday book, which has multiple messages from multiple powerful people, including allegedly former Manhattan real estate developer Donald Trump, now our president. This is the letter that he's claimed wasn't him, and the signature's been forged. We've now actually seen what it looks like, and it's this poem that's kind of in an outline of a naked woman's silhouette with his signature at it. Kaylin, why on earth? I keep asking this question. Why does House Oversight keep kind of stoking the fire here when it's the story that Donald Trump wants to go away and it just can't go away. It will not die.
Well, it's a good question, and I think that it's because, frankly, this was an item that the House Oversight Democrats were pushing the leadership on the House Oversight Committee to try and get wrangled into the whole investigation. So, you have this issue, this pet issue that has, for some parts of the MAGA Republican base, been something that they are highly interested in. So, it's one of those weighing of the issues. How should we do this? Because there's voters who care about this issue that voted for us, the lawmakers that are, handling this investigation. And there's also, the president who thinks that this is a waste of time and it's just nothing but, a slander wheel against him and other people. And I think that, largely I described it as a double win for the House GOP, and I'll explain why I said that. It's because we see, this effort to get everything on the Epstein investigation out there. And if it was something that was going to be accused or attacked as a partisan investigation, or one that wasn't going to be fully forthright, I don't think that we would see this trickle out there, or that we'd see all these Republican leaders try to avoid this letter getting out there. But they have
Mhm.
confidence enough to show it to the people and say, hey, here it is. And likewise, it's a win because, it, is something that really, at the end of the day, can't be proven. Even though we see that there is a signature that is listed by Donald Trump on there, he has vehemently denied writing it. Ghislaine Maxwell, who procured the birthday book, says that she has no recollection of, getting Trump's signature for it. So it gives more people information that they want if they're seeking Epstein-related info, but it also, leaves a lot of, plausible deniability, because one could say that, the idea of, forgers, I'm not saying anyone did forge this, but I'm just saying that forgers exist. And it's, you have the right person, the right place. It's not difficult to forge a signature. So you have all this, deniability there. And, again, it's important to stress that out of all this information, there still is no evidence that ties the president to having any sort of compromising situations with anyone underage or a minor, things like that. So it just doesn't amount to this level of criticism that I think a lot of people are levying at it. It's fun to gossip about it, but until we see actual photos, evidence, damning evidence that President Trump did something, so unbecoming, it hasn't gotten out there. And I think a lot of people are kind of, skeptical that there is anything out there.
I actually think there is no reason for Donald Trump to have denied that he signed this letter. There's no reason to believe that every other letter in the book is authentic. The Bill Clinton letter, for example, and many other powerful people who contributed letters to the book and have since expressed regret, that all of theirs are legitimate, but Donald Trump's is a fake. There's nothing wrong with him having signed a card that someone put on his desk. I mean, the rest of it is typed. It's pretty clear he didn't write the whole thing with his own hand. It's entirely plausible that on a stack of documents on his desk 22 years ago, someone slipped him a piece of paper and said, "Hey, will you sign this card?" I have
Yeah.
colleagues here. Our colleague Marissa used to send around cards for everyone's milestones and be like, "Hey, do you want to sign this?" And I would, and I wouldn't read the message. So for Donald Trump to go around denying this when it's like probably his signature, right? I mean, we don't know either way, but it probably is. It fits with the known timeline of Donald Trump's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. At the time that the letter was submitted to the birthday book, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were known to be friends, or at least friendly in the Palm Beach social circle. This was before Jeffrey Epstein was ever convicted or accused of any wrongdoing, before Donald Trump has said he discovered that Jeffrey Epstein was targeting girls at the Mar-a-Lago club. It doesn't add anything substantive to the timeline of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump's relationship, and in fact, could be seen as quite innocent, a charitable reading of the fact that Donald Trump signed this birthday card. Whereas, if you want to split hairs, Bill Clinton's is written entirely in Bill Clinton's own hand.
Yeah.
And Bill
And
Clinton
what
has not denied it.
on a substantive, why does this letter even matter kind of thing. There's a $10 billion lawsuit, at the center of this letter, and Donald
Right.
Trump is trying to sue News Corp and Murdoch. And I think that the only thing that really, amounted to anything significant whenever I saw this was that based on the way that the Wall Street Journal wrote the story, they hedged on not being able to necessarily confirm that it was, Donald Trump's authentic signature, but said that it was Donald Trump. It appeared to be his signature. So the way that the Wall Street Journal framed its story, I just have a hard time thinking that, the president is going to be successful because we have the precedent of New York Times versus Sullivan. It's, Sarah Palin had a very
But
good
he has
case.
been successful in litigation recently. I mean,
He has.
yes, he was very successful. So maybe like being totally vindicated is not the goal here of Donald Trump. I mean, he's successfully used litigation as a sword before. My last point to all of this is that I think Donald Trump undermines his own credibility by denying so vehemently something that is so plausibly true. And when he really doesn't have anything to hide, like you mentioned, Caitlin, there's never been a single piece of evidence tying Donald Trump to anything nefarious. He doesn't have any reason to be apologetic about the fact that 2 decades ago he was friendly with another prominent businessman in Palm Beach. So, this extreme denial from the Trump White House is just optically, from a PR standpoint, it doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, does that though maybe go to this administration's sort of being hell bent on shaping reality to how they want? I mean, yeah, like you say, that there's no real reason for him to deny it because of the because it lines up with the timeline, and there's really nothing, there's no there, as they like to say. This was 22 years ago. To think that they forged something 22 years ago, when he didn't have presidential aspirations, he was a powerful man, but albeit in sort of the Manhattan, New York socialite and business world. But I feel like that there is this prevalence in this administration that you kind of have to take everything they say as the gospel truth. And maybe this is just the one thing where they maybe have bitten off more than they can chew, especially
Wait,
because it stokes the flames of the conspiracy theory Epstein set.
this reminds me of the way that Donald Trump swore up and down that he did not have an affair with Stormy Daniels when it was pretty clear that he totally had an affair with Stormy Daniels, right? And he defended that up and down, even when admitting to the affair could have significantly helped his defense in the Manhattan prosecution against him with Alvin Bragg. If he had gone into that courtroom and said, I paid this woman hush money because I had slept with her and this was going to hurt my family, not because I'm trying to manipulate an election, but because this was going to come out. He might not be a convicted felon today, but he was so committed to what pretty clearly seemed like a lie that he was willing to put himself in legal jeopardy. He was willing to put his credibility on the line to stick to that lie. This sort of strikes me as another one where, for whatever personal reason, not he's willing to risk his political standing for a lie that he's like super committed to about something in his personal life. This reminds me of that whole episode.
There's one other thing I want to mention, and it's kind of a personal pet project of mine, with Epstein. That there has been a high profile resignation this week. The British ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson, has been forced to resign after only 6 months in the job. And what happened was there was a kind of there was a slew of emails that was obtained, I believe, by the Sun in the UK, which shows that his relationship was he was much closer with Jeffrey Epstein than I think anybody realized. There was indications that he was kind of helping him through his legal battle back in 2008. There's some quite damning language in there about how friendly they are. I don't know if the two of you know much about Mandelson, but he's this British political creature that has now had to resign because of his three separate scandals, three separate times, three completely different scandals, I should add. And it all goes over the last sort of 25 years. He was a hugely important figure in in the Tony Blair, the rise of Tony Blair, the rise of Gordon Brown and New Labour in the UK in the 1990s. He was kind of originally known as one of the original spin doctors or press guys. His nickname was the Prince of Darkness, I believe, which is just a grade A tier nickname. But I guess while it's very embarrassing for the UK government and embarrassing for Mandelson, whose political career is probably over, he's age 71. I do wonder, do you think that this would have any sort of effect over here in the US? He was put here primarily, I think, because they thought he would help with a UK-US trade deal. I mean, is this just going to be? This is the first kind of major political figure for a long time that's fallen because of the Epstein scandal. Do you foresee any sort of blowback in the US here, or is this going to just kind of be, well, it's a very British scandal, but we got our own stuff going on?
Well, without knowing all there is about the Mandelson situation, I do think that it's one of those things where it's like, how can, to Sarah's point, where, it's like, should you deny something? Should you, or should you just go along with it? It's all about, I think, like who the person is, how allegedly implicated they were, and how they can, play it off from like a political perspective, and having it sort of, reminds me of a, two, three strikes you're out kind of situation. If he already had this, history and, he had sort of bent to it, it would be like, if Andrew Cuomo became mayor again of New York, and then he had another, sexual harassment, allegation scandal. It would just be like,
Yeah, I should say that Mandelson, the other two were completely different scandals. One was involving a passport that he procured for somebody, or
uh,
allegedly, and the other was about taking a loan that he shouldn't have. So, like, it really is all over the political scandal spectrum. And there isn't any kind of sexual allegations here with Epstein. It's more so just the clearly he was a very close friend with him, and the friendship went on much longer than I think people realized. But yeah, it's interesting that it has the Epstein scandal kind of continues to take political scalps, as it were.
I think everyone who is gonna get got in America has probably been gotten. I mean, that's the unfortunate political reality for Epstein people, and but people who have followed the Epstein saga. And I hope that I'm proven wrong one day, but I think we've learned just about everything of substance we are going to learn about events that are now 10 plus years old. Anyone who was even tangentially related to not just the actual activity that Jeffrey Epstein was engaged in, but also just not sufficiently prosecuting it. I mean, Trump lost a cabinet secretary over his past ties to a lenient plea deal that Epstein struck. So I do think we've seen the sort of Red Scare of Epstein associations already in the US. That being
Yeah.
said, I did read up on this guy after you suggested we talk about him, Chris. And it seems like it's not just the association, but the fact that he seemed quite disturbed that Epstein was facing any accountability at all. And he was like, in emails that have been uncovered, like, oh, I promise we'd never do this to you in the UK. I'm just sick that you have to go to jail for soliciting underage prostitutes. That's terrible. So that's different than signing a birthday card,
Yeah.
in quite a lot. But you seem to be a big fan of this guy. I really read up on his history. What's your
No,
take?
he's a very important figure in everything in modern British politics over the last 30 years. When New Labour was dead in the water, sorry, the Labour Party was dead in the water after the Margaret Thatcher years, and it's just funny he keeps coming back. I think we all assumed in the UK that his career was over a long time ago, and then all of a sudden he pops up as the envoy to the US, and he'd never he'd also had some stuff that he'd said about Donald Trump in the past that was kind of unsavory, and he had to sort of explain that away. And yeah, I guess the everybody's just somewhat surprised that he got the job in the first place, and here we are 6 months later. He's out the job, albeit for something that I don't think anybody really saw coming. But it's a good old-fashioned political scalp in the UK, as they call it. Um, and yes, I think you're probably right that it may not have a much impact over here, and and everybody might have, what was it you said? Everybody who's been got's been got. So yeah, but I just wanted to tack on a little bit of British politics at the end there for my own enjoyment. But I think why don't we leave it there for this week, and we'll hopefully this time next week we'll be talking about the FBI's successful capture of the Charlie Kirk perpetrator, and we can see this person brought to justice. But thanks again for taking some time to hop on and speak.